the complexity of the route network, I think is one of the big things that I'll want to look at to help simplify things to make it easier to understand, and perhaps improve some efficiencies where services are being duplicated and things like that. And then obviously the BRT program is a big lift, and it's something that will take a lot of perseverance and to get through.
Okay, thanks. And I also noticed in your application materials, you have a property management company in Indianapolis, and I'm wondering how you're going to manage this job with those responsibilities.
Yeah, so I've been doing property development, actually renovations of historic properties in Indianapolis for about 10 years. And so we don't actually manage them anymore. We've turned all of the management over to a property management group, a third party, that is doing a really good job keeping the tenants happy, which is important. And so most of the day-to-day I'm able to walk away from and just be kind of a passive investor at this point.
Okay, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for Mr. Schoenberg? All right, seeing no other questions, then is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of confirmation? If you object, please raise your hand. Seeing no objections, we will record a unanimous vote in favor of confirmation. Thank you for being with us, Justin. And we'll move on to item number 2, Alder Carter.
Move to adopt item 2, 60199.
Alder Harrington Mckinney.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And I believe Alder Harrington Mckinney, you had questions about this one?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Mayor. On that item, the questions I had, it listed there were 4 service providers who responded to the RFP, and I wanted to have a list of who those 4 was, if the staff could address that. And my next question is that what is the diversity makeup of the service provider that was selected? And my third and final question is, was there any consideration for police officers who wanted to have some kind of diversity within that selection process? Was that a consideration? Those are my 3 staff questions.
Thank you. Would whoever is on from the staff side to answer questions, raise your hand so I can find you, please. I'm not sure who we've got here.
Again, the raise hand feature is available if you go to the bottom of your screen, click participants, you'll have it pop out on your right-hand side, and in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see raise hand.
Mayor, Assistant Chief John Patterson should be on the call.
Gotcha. Thank you. Chief Patterson, go ahead.
Sorry, I was struggling with finding my little raise hand link. I apologize. Thank you for the questions, Alder. We actually had 7 providers respond to the RFP, not 4. So the 7 were Carmen Alonzo, a single provider. Then we had Family Service Madison, and then Healthy Minds LLC, Jardine Mental Health Center, Modern Psychiatric or Psychological Network, not psychiatric, sorry, Real Living, and then Westside Psychotherapy, which was the ultimate selection. A diverse makeup of staff was really important to us, and they do have a very diverse makeup. I don't know the exact percentage breakdown, but I can certainly send you a link. They've got photos of all their staff members on their website, and you can get a real good look at at who they have there on staff. And certainly having cultural competency was important to us because this is not an optional thing for our staff. This is something that all staff members are going to be required to participate in. So we really did want to have options to make sure that it was a good fit for all our employees.
Thank you very much. That answers my question.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Please raise your hand if you object. Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item number 2 and move on to item number 3. Alder Carter.
Motion to adopt item 3-60202.
Alder Harrington Mckinney.
Second.
And Alder Harrington Mckinney, I believe that this one was your request as well.
Yes, it was. And the reason that I separated is that as a finance committee, we had voted on a resolution that said that all items that would come before us with a non-competitive purchase agreement would have accompanying documentation to outline why it was a non-competitive selection, and that was not included in the packet, and I wanted the Finance Committee to speak to that.
All right, thank you, Alder. This one, if staff again could raise their hand so I can find you. Chief Price, is this you? Chief Price, is this your item?
Yes.
Go ahead.
My item, but could you have, since I moved in this position, Chief Moravik, our other staff person, is the person that had been working closely with the contract and has the information. He can answer that question. If he could raise his hand, he could speak to that.
Happy to do it if I can find him.
Hit raise your hand inside the system, Tim, so it pops up on the mayor's screen.
He's also listed as Art Price. I think he shared the link.
Okay. There we go. No wonder. There you go. 2 Art Prices in one meeting. Scary.
Double trouble. Uh-oh.
Link. Sorry about that. Alder, this grant was from the Wisconsin State Fire Chiefs. Initially, well over 10 years ago, the hazmat team was developed. We signed a state contract with the state of Wisconsin, and they provided funding for each individual team. And we're one of a level 2 team, and we're slotted X amount of money a year for being that with the state contract. Well, over the years, they kept backing this money down. And then to make a long story short, the Wisconsin State Fire Chiefs went in and lobbied the state government to get additional $500,000 for each team, for the teams in general as a whole. That was awarded after 6-7 years of lobbying. Last year was the first year of the grant, and that was $250,000. It's $500,000 for the 2-year budget, and we received $500, and we went through the same process as this. This year, fortunately, we got considerable amount more. So the Wisconsin State Fire Chiefs, when they put this grant together, they
Chief, I think you might be speaking to item number 4, not item number 3.
Oh, I apologize. So what was the first question? I apologize.
So the question on item number 3 is it's a non-competitive purchase, and I think the Alder is interested in the justification for that.
Yeah. The reason why it's not competitive is this grant was already bid out as the grant from the state. So the state awarded us this money and told us we had to purchase from these individuals. That's what they based the grant off of.
So thank you very much. But to be consistent, my request is that document be attached, and we work very hard to make sure that any non-competitive agreement that came before the Finance Committee, the Finance Committee did a really excellent job at designing and crafting that form to be attached. And so the question is not, the amount of the money or the selection process, but the documentation should be accompanying the non-competitive agreement, and that's what the body had agreed on. So could you furnish that documentation so that we would be in line and consistent with the resolution that was passed by the Finance Committee a couple of years ago?
Yes, I'll have somebody sign it.
We have all sorts of staff wanting to weigh in here. Mr. Schmidtke first, and then Mr. May.
Mayor and Alder Mckinney, the documentation is attached to the agenda item in Legistar. It's also on pages 21 to 24 of the full agenda packet. So it is
because
attached.
when I went in to see it, I didn't see it.
Well, it's there now. I don't know if it was missed technologically in the interim, but it is there, and it is in the full agenda packet that was sent out.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. May, did you have anything? Oh, okay. All right. Are there any other questions for the fire department on this one? All right. Seeing no questions, is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of this item? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item number 3. Move on to item number 4, Alder Carter.
Yes, move adoption, item number 4, 60181.
Alder Harrington McKinney. I believe that was a second from Alder Harrington McKinney. Is that correct, Alder?
That is correct.
Thank you. All right. Are there any questions for staff, or is there any discussion on this item? Alder Harrington McKinney.
Yes, I have a question from staff. If they could just give a brief summary as to what this resolution actually does to the water utility capital budget.
Alder, this is item number 4, which is the Madison Fire Hazmat.
Oh, no, I'm 5, excuse me.
Yep, you're looking for item number 5. All right, so any other questions on item number 4? Seeing none, is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of item number 4? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item number 4, and we'll move on to item number 5, Alder Carter.
Move adoption of item number 5, 60149.
And Alder Harrington McKinney, a second.
Second.
And Alder Harrington McKinney, I believe you had questions.
Yes, if the staff could give a brief summary, because I read through the documentation, but just a brief summary of what the resolution does to the water utility capital budget, if anything.
All right. I think we have staff here. Go ahead, Adam.
Thank you. I'm Adam Wiederhave, design and construction engineer for the utility. I drafted these budget adjustments, and in summary, the net result to the capital budget at the water utility is net neutral. There's no increase or impact where we would expend more than we budgeted for. There's basically two components to all these transfers. One, it takes 2020 projects for water main replacement on various streets that were listed as sub-projects. They were budgeted under major categories in the water utilities capital budget, whereas some of these projects were budgeted as individual standalone projects in the city's financial system. So all this does is transfer those intended funds to the sub-projects as we budgeted for them. And the other component of this is on existing active projects, either through intentional scope adjustments or favorable bids. This transfers some budget excess from other projects into some other sub-projects that may fall under different categories where they would require to be moved under this budget amendment. Some of those are precautionary in nature, so if there's any net budget impact at all, it would be that we are not going to spend the full amount we budgeted.
Thank you.
Alder, does that answer your questions?
That does answer my question. So effectively, you're just doing some adjusting, and it's not going to overall impact the budget of the water committee. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for staff on this item? Seeing none, thank you, Adam. You're good. And then is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of this item? Seeing no objection, we will record a unanimous vote in favor of item number 5 and move on to item number 6. Let's just get a motion on the table. Alder Carter?
Yes, I move adoption of item number 66224.
Alder Harrington McKinney?
And second?
Moved and seconded. And we do have a registrant on this item who I believe is trying to call in. So we have Dan Brown of Oak Park Road in Marshall, Wisconsin, in support, wishing to speak. Can we get Mr. Brown in a position to speak, please?
Dan, you should have an unmute option on your screen.
He may not have a microphone on his computer. That may be him on the phone.
All right, let's give it a try.
Dan, is that you?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm Daniel Brown. I'm the executive manager at Ho-Chunk Gaming Madison, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to just express my support for the resolution. We've been working with staff for the past at least 6 years now, city staff, and very much appreciate the effort here for this AB interchange, and just on behalf of the Ho-Chunk Nation and on behalf of Ho-Chunk Gaming Madison, I just wanted to express my full support and appreciation for this resolution being brought forth to this evening.
Thank you, Dan. Are there any questions for our registrant? Alder Kemble, do you have questions for the registrant? All right. Alder Tierney, do you have questions for the registrant?
I didn't have questions, so I was just going to make some comments.
Okay. Thank you, Alder. We'll hold on to your hand up then. Anyone else have questions for Mr. Brown? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Brown, for joining us today. And we'll go to Alder Kemble. Questions for staff? Okay. Alder Kemble has questions for staff.
So if Transportation Director Lynch could just explain to us what this project is, what WISDOT's role in the project is, what the city's role in the project is, and then I may have a few more questions.
Thank you, Alder. Mr. Lynch, go ahead.
Hey, I realized I was trying to explain this project to Ian Mosman last night, and in doing that, I realized how complicated it is. So I'm gonna, is it all right if I share my screen?
Go ahead.
Okay. And so,
and before you go on, Mr. Lynch, let me just remind people, if you want to raise your hand while the screen is shared, you have to exit full screen so you can see the participant list again. Go ahead, Tom.
Both the Mill Pond Road intersection and the County AB intersections are very difficult intersections. They've had quite a few crashes, and they're high injury crashes. So much so that Mill Pond Road, it's the second most dangerous intersection in the city of Madison by crash severity. The Wisconsin DOT identified both of the intersections as having a very high crash safety, potential for safety improvement. Mill Pond Road has the third highest in the whole state. And then if it was combined with County AB, which this improvement does both, it has the highest potential for safety improvement within the whole state. We just started looking, rather than looking at numbers of crashes at our intersections in the last year and a half, we started looking at crash severity, and particularly the number of injuries. And so we've kind of ranked 1,600 of our intersections, and you can see that these two intersections are number 2 and number 3 respectively, only the Stoughton Road, East Washington intersection is the most dangerous. The state has kind of toyed with fixing these intersections for, I'm going to just say, for the last 6 or 7 years. And at one time, they were involved in the Beltline interchange improvement with I-94. 2 years ago, they pulled the improvements out. And so I was with the city at that time, and so the city wrote two pretty pointed letters, almost trying to stop the project because we felt like they weren't in the Beltline interchange project. WISDOT was not addressing the key safety considerations in the area. This is just a quote. With this letter, we want to reemphasize the urgent safety need to request a grade separated solution that addresses safety. We do have delays at Mill Pond Road, and sometimes those delays can be extreme. We did a little bit of a study when we were trying to understand the Ho-Chunk proposed development and how that might affect things. And some of the delays can be up, to over 500 seconds to make a left turn out of Mill Pond Road. So it could be quite extreme. As Dan Brown stated, the Ho-Chunk Nation would like to develop portions of their property and add development or investment to that. The development was approved by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission expressed concern regarding the access to the site, particularly at Mill Pond Road. One of the conditions to their approval was that the PD district not create traffic or parking demand disproportionate to the facilities improvements designed to meet those demands. So this has been a safety problem for Madison and Madison residents, but also it affects, what's happening on the site as well as the golf course. As far as regionally, the Sprecher Road corridor or County AB corridor is identified as a long-term major arterial on the east side, and the capacity expansion is recommended in RTP. In 2017, the City of Madison approved the Madison Yarrahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan, which includes, about 3,000 additional dwelling units on the east side and between 5,000 and 6,000 of new employment. As part of that plan, they recommended an interchange, a slight relocation of County AB to the east to, in many ways, kind of accommodate how the landfill has occurred, and then connecting Mill Pond Road to the interchange. Madison Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan also did recommend an overpass at Meyer Road. And I don't know if you can see my thing, but you can see there's the Meyer Road. This is the proposal. This is a better graphic than what I've used previously because I understand how confusing it is. So because we wrote letters to WSDOT, they went ahead with the Beltline interchange, but they said that they would study the safety of these two intersections again. And when they studied them, that's where they came up and realized that these were some of the two most dangerous intersections in the state. And so then they looked for ways to find alternate funding to address this high safety need. What's being proposed right now is what you see in black. They propose to construct the diamond interchange. Eventually, what's in dashed yellow will be future or could be future improvements. One would be the relocation of AB. And then to the west, you can see the dash, that would be an extension of Meyer Road. And the DOT did look and actually do some preliminary designs for that extension. What this resolution does is this resolution would allow us to enter a cost sharing agreement with WSDOT for funding the frontage road that connects to the interchange. And so what you see in blue represents what the cost sharing agreement would need. It also authorizes a little bit of right of way, both on the north side and the south side of AB, that they could use for some of these access roads. This is the graphic that I used to show, but I guess it's too complicated. It confuses people, so that's why I made the simpler one. This kind of shows what's going on. You can see the golf course right here, landfill here, and this is these are county facilities right here. This is a typical section proposed for Mill Pond Road here. To the left, you can see where Highway 1218 is. This is Mill Pond Road, and then there would be a shared use path to the south side of Mill Pond Road. If we looked at the bike ped connections that were recommended in the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan, the red represents proposed shared use paths. The blue represents bicycle lanes. What's outlined in yellow is what would be provided by this proposal that WSDOT's moving forward with. It does not include Meyer Road. WSDOT feels like Meyer Road is a local road, not a regional road, so they have just thoughts on what they feel like they should be investing in and what they shouldn't be. As mentioned, the DOT did not budget money for this, but when they saw the safety need and where it ranked statewide, they've started to piece together different funding pots. This did qualify for $10 million worth of highway safety improvement funds. And so that's, I think, been scheduled. There's also the opportunity for them to get a build grant. Build grants use a cost benefit analysis. And unfortunately, intersections with a high injury rate score well because in cost benefit analysis, because human lives are worth so much. So they are pursuing this funding option, and they also have some other state funding. I think this grant application they will be submitting is due in the middle of May. We are a partner with them. Build grants are more competitive when they show that there's a commitment for local funding. And so this resolution states that, we would contribute towards our frontage road. And I think that's, this is basically the text of the resolution. And that's the freeway plan that they've developed. So I'm available for questions. Maybe I'll stop.
Thank you, Tom. Alder Campbell, do you have questions?
I do. I have a few questions. So is that slide that's not the resolution slide, the other slide with the pink? If you could put going the other way. No, going the other way.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The very last slide in. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. Is that the extent of the WISDOT project?
No. So I'll get into the weeds a little bit. The DOT has wanted to convert Highway 1218 to a freeway from I-94 to County End in Cottage Grove for a while. I'm going to say 5 years ago, they did a freeway conversion plan. And this is the freeway conversion plan that ultimately would allow that freeway conversion to occur. You can see here's Highway N right there. You can't see I-39, but this is County AB. So they did get an approved environmental document for this plan. Went through public comment and everything, and but they did not get funding for it. So this is a plan that's been approved environmentally. They are basically doing, I don't know if you can see my mouse cursor. They're basically doing, they're basically doing this portion that my mouse is floating around on the west section by AB. This portion right here, which involves purchase of right-of-way and lots of other things, that is not occurring. Instead, it will just bend around and go to the north for right now.
So I guess my question is, so that intersection is the thing that $39 million buys?
Yeah, so the cost of it is about between $35 and $37 million for County AB. They looked at Meyer Road overpasses. The cost for that was between, I'm going from memory, I could get you the exact numbers, around 18 million. The reason why they pursued AB and not, there's a couple of reasons why they pursued AB instead of Meyer Road. The main reason I think is that AB, they solved both safety problems at both Mill Pond Road and AB, whereas Meyer Road would just solve the safety problems at Mill Pond Road, essentially.
So I guess just to be clear, in this resolution is for our share of funding the intersection part of the freeway expansion. But DOT is not doing the entire freeway expansion. They're just doing the intersection part, and that's what they're applying for the build grant for?
Yeah, so we, in this graphic right here, we are saying we will pay for what's in blue. So can you see what's there in blue? Yeah. So we're saying that we will pay for the roadway that connects Mill Pond Road to the interchange. We are not, I guess our city limit ends at AB, and so we're not paying for this portion. We're paying for the frontage road that would connect Mill Pond Road to the interchange. We are also saying, now this is contingent on park board approval, but there are little slices of right-of-way that are needed here and on the north side. Rob has kind of So that there is some right of way that would also be required.
Okay, and so the 10 million that they cobbled together for highway safety improvement money, you said that was scheduled. When is that scheduled for?
I think they are planning. I think they have scheduled the HSIP money for 2022. It was 23. Typically, the HSIP money goes in grants of about $1 to $1.5 million. But instead, they were able to collect kind of all of the HSIP money for the state and kind of focus it in this area because of the need or the high score that it got based on the formulas that they use.
Okay, and so my next question, I guess, is for Mr. Schmidtke. If it's for 2022, we won't need to amend this year's capital budget, but will we need to amend our SIP? Or I guess it's also for you, Tom. For the build grant, do they need to see an amendment to our SIP, our 2022 SIP, in order for it to be a legit commitment for the build grant?
Alder Kemble, that's what this resolution does. So it amends the SIP so that this project is included. And then when we get to the 2022 capital budget, those dollars will have to be appropriated by the council.
Okay. So in the resolve clause, I see the 4 resolved clauses, but I don't see anything specifically saying the SIP is amended. I see the verbiage in the fiscal note, but I guess I'm wondering if we have to have a resolve clause saying that it's amended.
Well, that was my understanding of the intent, so.
This is being presented to the MPO in May, and they will be amending the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, for the region. And so either it'll pass or it won't, but it is going before the MPO board. This right here is making it competitive, the grant application competitive. We could do this in August, but then they don't have this for their grant application, which is due, I think it's May 18th.
So if the MPO doesn't approve the TIP amendment, then what happens?
Then this becomes more complicated, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, the project, for the project to move forward with federal money, it has to be, the MPO has to put it in their plan. So.
Okay, done.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Tierney, do you have questions for staff?
I didn't have any questions for staff, no.
Thank you, Alder. Just hold on until we work through. Alder Harrington Mckinney, questions for staff?
Questions asked and answered.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Carter, questions for staff?
Yes, I do. If you can go back to the map that had the blue service road, I guess it would be. So I travel this road often. So for the service road for Mill Road coming from the Ho Chunk property, I see clearly there's a service road there. But coming from the landfill, would the person have to go all the way up to the interchange and come back?
Yes, they would.
And is that in gray and black?
Okay. Last night when I made this, I thought this was a great graphic, but maybe maybe I can. So, if you can see my mouse.
Yes.
Okay. Right now, vehicles take a left into the landfill and go like this. And then here is like where the clean sweep is and all that. In the future, they would get off the interchange, go north, go around, and then this black right here is a service road that would serve it would serve the landfill, but it would also serve, there's a motel here. And so
yes, yes.
That north service road would serve both the landfill and the motel. So we've talked this over with streets, and Charlie felt like this is a little bit more in direction for, let's say, the streets workers that dump garbage here. Charlie seemed to think that the safety, the added safety, of not having to make a left turn, not having to get up to speed, in 0.4 seconds, to make a right turn out was worth the indirection that would occur.
Okay. And is this part of DOT, when DOT likes to look into the future, is this part of DOT's reconstruction of 12 and 18 going towards Cambridge eventually?
I don't think so. I'll go to the very back. So this is their freeway conversion plan. Okay, and so there are, like, for instance, there's a grade separation. I think this is at Vilas Road, and then perhaps a grade separation at Siegel Cow connecting it with Femrite. But these are low volume roads. These have 500 cars a day. Okay, if we compare that to County AB has, between 4,000 and 6,000 cars a day, and then Mill Pond Road has 7,000 cars that will go up to 3,000 cars. So the crash exposure at AB and at Mill Pond Road is just orders of magnitude higher than the crash exposure that at Femrite and Vilas Road. So I think eventually these will get done, but the exposure for these roads right here are much less than the exposure for AB and then for Mill Pond Road.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder. All right. Are there any other questions for staff? All right. Seeing none, Tom, if you can take us back to our Brady Bunch mode. Thank you. Now, Alder Tierney to kick off the discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to thank everybody for their consideration of this resolution and hopefully support. Back in the day when I worked for former State Representative Rob Call and Secretary Gottlieb was at DOT, we sat down with DOT staff and had many drawings before us on how to deal with or potentially deal with the safety problems with these intersections. And unfortunately, the powers that be at the time put up roadblocks and didn't allow anything to move forward. So I am especially appreciative of Governor Evers and current Secretary at DOT Thompson for their support and willingness to move this forward and recognizing the public safety issues that exist. In addition to helping put a key piece in place for the Ho-Chunk Nation to go forward with their proposal. Another thing I look at with this interchange that's important as well is when you look at the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan, most, if not all of that currently is within the McFarland School District. It's not Madison Metropolitan School District. So in the future, for the residential development there, we can expect to see more vehicle traffic going down Highway AB, crossing over 1218, and then they'd go down to the schools that are currently within the bounds of the village of McFarland. So we will see significant traffic increases, whether school buses going over 1218 or individual vehicles. People that need to drop their kids off at school during the day are definitely going to use that as a quicker means to get to their schools, as opposed to trying to cut over to Stoughton Road and heading down with morning commute traffic. So that's a consideration that I'm not sure too many people are aware of when discussing this proposal. But I know for me personally, I use this intersection, the 1218 AB intersection, quite often. And I remember distinctly in 2018, the number of times where I drove up north to visit family members in the middle part of the state, and on the way home, there were 6 different weekends when I came home and I cut over on 1218 to take AB down to Sigocow Road, and there were accidents, horrific accidents each and every time. So this is definitely an area that has needed to be improved for a long time, and we need to move forward with this. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Alder. All right, is there further discussion on this item? Seeing no further discussion on this item, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of this item? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item number 6 and move on to item number 7, Alder Carter.
Move adoption of item number 7, 60226.
Thank you, Alder. I've lost Alder Harrington Mckinney. Alder Furman, a second.
Second.
Thank you, Alder. All right, this has been moved and seconded. Alder Kemble, I believe you had questions?
Yes. Yes. I'm hoping that staff can just talk to us a little bit about the process for donor TIDs, how that works. Also, if we could get a status on the land banking program generally, where it's at, and also let us know about when the Joint Review Board is going to meet to approve this, if this is approved.
All right, I think we'll start with Mr. Rolfs.
Very good. Can you hear me? Trying to address, very good. Alder Kemble, I'll try to address your questions directly. So the Joint Review Board we do not have a meeting scheduled as of right now. The current estimated time for that meeting would be probably in mid to late August, possibly early September, depending upon how timing and schedules go. Obviously, everything is very simple right now, but assuming it stays this way, that's our estimated time. As far as you had a question about donor TIDs and the process for that, the process by which it occurs is a project plan amendment is completed for a TIF district that is generating sufficient revenue to recover its debts and would potentially otherwise close. However, we have determined in other places where we would want to reallocate those excess incremental revenues to districts that could use additional assistance. We've done this in the past with TID 38 on South Park Street and TID 40 on the north side. where we had districts that did not generate sufficient increment to pay for their costs. In this case, what we are proposing is to amend TID 39, which is the Southeast Industrial Area, and to provide additional incremental revenue to tax increment TID 42, which is the Wingra TID that covers a good portion of the sort of mid-South Park Street area. The funds would then be transferred from TID 39 to TID 42 to cover, among other things, this acquisition, which would be funded through the land banking program, but the actual dollars would come as a part of this donor plan between TID 39 and TID 42. As far as the actual land banking program goes, staff has met to begin, we've gotten further than beginning. We have a rough outline of what the land banking program would be and the priorities. I believe we were almost to a final draft. I will look to both Matts here to confirm that. And then we had some sort of this pandemic occurred and it kind of blew things up. So
just to add to that on the land banking fund. So yes, staff met multiple times. There was a draft. The budget that created the land banking fund directed us for staff to develop it and take it to Housing Strategy Committee, which we would have done in late March, except for that meeting was subsequently canceled because of COVID-19. So that's on hold. So we have a draft that gives guidance on sort of where staff should search for sites. And those sorts of criteria are things like being on a future BRT line, a site that is difficult to develop or might need to be part of a larger assemblage. The plans call for redevelopment, which the South Madison plan that's happening right now should be farther along than it is, but is a little bit on hold because of this, but it generally identifies this area as a place for redevelopment. And then it also calls for staff to search for places where we can stack other sources of capital, such as TIF. So this site meets most of the criteria that staff are proposing as part of that policy.
Other questions, Alder? Nope. Okay, thank you. We have Alder Harrington Mckinney. Did you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. It says that it's contingent on the approval of the Joint Review Board, and that's not meeting. And so is this premature in line? Can we act on this budget amendment and it has not been formally approved by the Joint Review Board?
You do have the legal authority, I believe, to act on this. The Joint Review Board is the entity that has final statutory authority over approving any and all TIF district amendments or creations. So from a process perspective, they don't actually act on TIF district amendments until the Common Council has acted on that amendment. So we are in the process, we have a plan finalized, ready to move forward, but there's a statutory process that we're required to follow to amend the project plan and complete this donor recipient plan for TIDs 39 and 42. So this is something that we've done similar things to this in the past where we do TIF loans to projects contingent upon approval of the creation or amendment of a TIF district. So this is it's a little bit of a twist on that, but it's still the same sort of idea that we've done in the past with project plan amendments or expenditures being contingent upon receipt of approval from the Joint Review Board.
So my follow-up question is that is there a need to have some clarity in the language? Because when I read it, it says that all of this is contingent on the approval. So is there a clarity necessary? You said it's been done before, but do we need to be sharper in the language to say by ordinance we can do this as opposed to that? And so that's really why I raised my hand. It was confusing to me.
We can try to clarify that if I would want to work with the city attorney on that to make sure that that it's something that meets with their approval as well.
Thank you.
Attorney May has a potential answer for you.
Alder Harrington Mckinney, in fact, when you go to the Joint Review Board, you have to know exactly what it is you're asking them to do. So in the order of sequence, we would need to approve this. This is our plan, and then take it to the Joint Review Board and seek their approval as we go forward. So the indication that we're going to do this contingent upon review of the Joint Review Board is, in some sense, almost not needed, because they're going to have to approve it regardless of whether we say it's contingent on that or not. So we could look at some language, but we can do that maybe before the meeting next week. But I think this pretty much follows what the legal rules are in terms of the order in which you do things.
Okay, now that's well, but when I read it, it didn't. And so I'm not a mastermind. You knew all the intricacies. So if there is a way that we can sharpen that language, it would be helpful.
Yeah, we can talk about that here before the meeting.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Harrington Mckinney. Any other questions? All right. Alder Kemble, questions?
Yeah, just quick follow-up for Wachter.
Go ahead.
Do you still plan to take, when you finalize the land banking program plan, do you still plan to take it to housing strategies?
Yes.
And I guess, we'll figure out when that can be.
We're working on that.
Could you also, please, when you do Matt Mikolajewski heads up, bring it to economic development as well?
Yep, we can do that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for staff? Alder Carter.
Not for staff, for discussion.
All right, go ahead, Alder. There's no other questions, I believe.
Okay, I'd like to urge my colleagues to approve this. The South Madison plan is well overdue, and this is an investment that I hope will lead to many, many more investment in South Madison. I think that what we've done in the past has been sporadic, and what this initial investment is really going to spur both public and private investment in South Madison, which is sorely needed. And I would hope that each one of you would approve this and vote yes on the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing no additional discussion, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of this item? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of this item, number 7, and we will move on to item number 8. Alder Carter.
Move adoption item number 859909.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Harrington Mckinney, a second.
Second.
Thank you, Alder Harrington Mckinney. And you have questions?
Just a question. Has there been a consideration or a discussion about setting a time limit? I see that there are 3 dates that are proposed, November the 12th for our deliberations on the budget, the 11, 12, 13, and 14. And is there a consideration of setting a ending time, whether it's 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock? Is very challenging to make wise decisions when it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So has that come up for discussion, or where is the appropriateness of that? That's my question.
Thank you, Alder. Laura, do you want to answer that?
Alder Harrington McKinney, that would be at the discretion of the body. So it would be up to the council to include any potential end times for the meetings. We could do it via this resolution, or it could be done when we get closer to the deliberations and we know how many amendments are scheduled to be taken up.
So would that constitute a friendly amendment if we added that consideration where this 12 o'clock is really going through the process of making those kinds of decisions that impact the budget of the city, and it's 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning? That's just not viable, and we've been in that situation before. So what is the process of adding a time limit for that, whether it's 12 o'clock or noon? Well, what would be the consideration, and how would we move that forward for the body to consider?
I would suggest, if that is something that you would like to explicitly propose as part of this resolution, that you would make that motion and have the body vote on that.
Alder, I think that the appropriate thing would be to, once we are through with questions for staff, to move an amendment to the resolution.
Thank you.
Alder Verveer, questions for staff?
Yes. Thank you very much, Mayor. I do have questions of Finance Department staff, not about the very brief resolution, but about the attached, obviously tentative 2021 budget calendar. I recall that the finance director had shared with our committee a month ago that the capital budget kickoff would be delayed until late May. Obviously, the date on the calendar that's included in our packet is come and gone. So I guess generally the first question would be, will we have an updated calendar available to the council in the near future? And then secondly, have we set the date of the capital budget agency kickoff?
Alder Verveer, that is simply an error on my part, and I will update the attachment in Legistar. The capital budget process is slated to kick off with agencies next Tuesday, May 5th. And then the date on that calendar should be that on May 12th, the next meeting of this committee, we would give a more complete outlook of the 2021 operating budget, along with the guidance that was provided to agencies.
Oh, great. So you do have an updated calendar that you can share with us yet this evening?
Yes, and I'll take care of that right away.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. My other question is a bit more general, and that is, for those of us that were not participants in the Common Council Executive Committee discussion about our budget process that occurred, several months ago, as I recall now, could staff enlighten us a little further on what exactly the thoughts are with the the new proposed Finance Committee briefings of agency budget requests? Obviously prior to the mayor working on her executive budget.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So prior, I think it was in February, we began to have, we appeared at CCEC to discuss council perspectives on ways that we could continue to engage the council more in the budget process. So at the direction of that conversation, our goal was to develop a schedule where we could have more frequent check-ins with the Finance Committee about the status of the budget process and where we are in the process, as well as providing more updates around changes and assumptions regarding the outlook for the upcoming year. So with the updated calendar that we've outlined, we've been able to, with the exception of the last month of April from kicking the process back, we've been able to maintain all of the briefings that we had initially scheduled, again, with the intent of providing more deliberate and updated information about where we are in the budget planning process, just to provide more ongoing updates to Alders. Another objective of this process is to formalize what has been an informal process of notifying Alders of when agency budget requests are published and available online. In the past, that's been something that's been communicated to you either via email, either from me or from staff in the council office. And so by having these check-ins at the finance committee, having the status of the agency request in terms of their publishing as part of the agenda, it'll just kind of be a touch point to make sure that everybody, certainly on finance, but the entire council is aware of where we are in the planning process.
That sounds great, Laura. Thank you for the further explanation. One final question about these new check-ins with the finance committee, which again, I think are really nice innovation. Would division and department heads and budget contacts, for that matter, be expected to attend these agency request overviews? It would be almost a mini early form of the agency budget hearings, or is that not the case? The idea is that only you and your colleagues, Laura, in the finance department would provide these overviews so that all the staff weren't expected to attend these early overviews.
Yeah, it was not our intent that staff would, that level of staff would attend those overview sessions. Our intent was more along the lines that we would provide high-level summaries of sort of the policy implications of what we're seeing in the agency requests, so that you all are aware. And then if there are more specific items for that we want to come back and address within a specific agency's budget, we could include that in one of the future briefing sessions.
Okay, very, very helpful. I'll just say here in closing that I'm sure you would be doing it anyway, but when you have your budget kickoff meeting next month, that you I think fully explain the new budget calendar additions to the staff, so that they're not all of a sudden thinking, oh, are we going to have two capital agency hearings and two operating budget hearings before the finance committee now? It'll be the way that they've grown accustomed to it in terms of their participation at the table. Because I presume that some of them might have that same question that I had.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Laura. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you,
Alder. Verveer, any other questions?
No, thank you, Mayor.
All right. Are there any other questions for staff on item number 8? Seeing no further questions, Alder Harrington Mckinney, would you like to move the amendment to the resolution suggested by Attorney May?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To the final be it further resolved clause. Be it further resolved that the November 12th, 13th, and 14th meetings of the council shall recess or adjourn no later than 12 a.m. midnight unless the council by a 2/3 vote agrees to extend the time of recess to a different time.
Right, so it's been moved by Alder Harrington Mckinney. Is there a second for this motion? If you wish to second, please raise your hand. Alder Carter.
Second.
Thank you, Alder Carter. And you should all have that language in your email as well. Alder Furman.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate very much the intent of this amendment, but I'm not going to support it. I agree that we do not make good decisions very late at night, but I do think we have the ability at any point during a budget hearing to adjourn, and I'd rather see us do that at a budget hearing than than run into issues about having to take a vote and 12 o'clock, et cetera. So I absolutely agree that we should not be making decisions at 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. No good comes of that. But I don't think this is the right process for that. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Is there further discussion on the amendment to the resolution? Alder Carter.
Yes. Having gone through quite a number of budget hearings, I can say that for the first time that we even took a vote to leave was at 3 o'clock in the morning that we decided to, I guess, table the budget hearing. This was back in 2016, just to come back the next day. And that was at 3 o'clock in the morning. Last year, we did take a vote. Alder Badar kept saying that it's 11 o'clock, it's 12 o'clock, etc. I think we got out around 12 o'clock. Other than that, we've been going the distance, quite frankly. I think that it's naive to say that we can monitor the situation when I can only recall twice. And quite frankly, at 3 o'clock, we might as well have went to 7 o'clock. So I am going to support this. I would prefer it not be midnight, but midnight's better than nothing. And I'm going to support this. And I think that if we want to stay later, we can definitely have a vote on that. But it's nice to know that at least by midnight, we will be coming back the next day. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Any further discussion on this item? Alder Furman.
The only other suggestion I would throw out there, if this body feels like they're going to pass this, is on the third day. I don't want to be in a situation where we still haven't passed our budgets and we're relying on a 2/3 vote to keep the meeting going. I think we may have notice issues and rescheduling issues. And so obviously, if we reach that length of, having 3 days and, we can't get 2/3 vote to go past midnight, I think we're going to be in a lot of trouble. And so I'd like to not see us in that position. So, if the Finance Committee decides to pass this, I would at least then possibly, just suggest that you pass it with not doing that on the third day.
Thank you, Alder. Is there any further discussion? Is there any desire to change the motion to remove the night of the 14th from the limitation? Alder Carter.
Yes, I believe we can remove the night of the 14th.
Alder Harrington Mckinney is the maker of the motion. Do you have an objection?
I don't have an objection, but I'm thinking about Alder Furman's concerns about us completing our work. Yes, we will complete our work. The reason I put forward the recommendation to consider a time limit is that our constituents, our residents, always ask the question, how can we make decisions about the city and the budget going forward at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning? So my concern was to institute that 12 o'clock. I don't have any leaning either way of whether we should take the 14th off. And so if we complete before the 14th, that's great. And if it goes to the 14th, that's okay. And so I'm not going to add the friendly amendment. I'm going to let the body vote it up and down. My concern was the time.
Thank you, Alder. Mike May would like to weigh in here. There you go.
Thank you. I would just say, I think as a procedural matter, Alder Furman has a point, and I didn't think about the problem on the third night that you actually do have to complete the budget on that night. So I didn't think about that when I quickly drafted this. So I think he's got a good point that if you limit it to midnight on the first two nights, you'll be making good decisions. But if you absolutely have to finish the budget, you may end up having to go till 2 a.m. Recently, you've never been more than 2 nights, so hopefully that won't be the case this year.
Thank you, Attorney May. Alder Harrington Mckinney, the procedural question before us is whether it is friendly to the body, and that needs to include every member of the body, including you, to remove from your amendment the November 14th date. And the reason for doing that is that if we are in a situation where we use all 3 nights and we are not done by midnight on the last night, it is, I think, preferable generally for us to go past midnight than it is to have to pause and renotice another day, which would postpone the adoption of the budget by multiple days. And we're up against a deadline anyway by going as late as the 14th. So I'll ask again to the body if there's any objection to the amendment before us be it further resolved that the November 12th and 13th meetings of the council shall recess or adjourn not later than 12 a.m., midnight, etc. Alder Carter. Sorry, Alder.
I'm sorry. I didn't know my hand was up, but I agree with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. All right. Is there any objection to that being the amendment before us? All right. Seeing no objection, that's the amendment before us. Is there any further discussion of the amendment? Seeing no further discussion, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of this amendment? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of this amendment. That brings us to the underlying resolution. Is there any discussion on the underlying resolution? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of the underlying resolution? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote on item number 8. And without objection from the body, I would entertain, Alder Carter, a motion on item number 10 to refer to the May 12th Finance Committee meeting.
Move item number 10-60249 to be referred to the May 12th, 2020 Finance meeting. Move approval.
Alder Harrington Mckinney, a motion, a second to refer.
Second to refer.
Moved and seconded to refer item number 10 to the May 12th Finance Committee meeting. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of referral? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of referring item number 10, which will take us back to item number 9, which is a presentation from staff. Mr. Schmidtke.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to just share my screen. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I will apologize in advance as someone who gets worn out staring at screens all day, and we're end of an hour-and-a-half meeting, and now to make you stare at the screen longer. I will try to move very quickly through this. It's basically updates to presentations I've given at the last 2 Finance Committee meetings, just to give you some pictures of what is happening with the economy, with I think the COVID implications nationally, as well as some of the local information that we're beginning to see. So I'll go through this hopefully quickly and wrap up the meeting. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Again, as you probably have seen, a surge in weekly initial unemployment insurance claims. These are unprecedented levels, and you can see on this graph, sort of the cutout here, that the jump has been throughout the month of April, and we're now at 26 million, where before we barely broke a million during the Great Recession. The unemployment claims over the past 5 weeks exceed the jobs created since the Great Recession and dwarf the jobs lost during the Great Recession by almost 3 times. These are the areas that are getting hit dramatically. It's no surprise. Food service, education, and health services. Health services is really the impact of emptying hospitals and clinics for COVID response, and there are really no elective surgeries or even other types of surgeries or care going on. And you can see the other effects here, which I think are no surprise to what we've seen. Jobs are projected to fall to the lowest level since the late 90s. A recent national survey by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and MetLife Insurance Company, 1 in 4 small businesses could close permanently if this downturn continues for more than 2 months. So that means that those jobs could be lost permanently, and speaks to the extent of the economic damage and its lasting effect beyond simply this initial safer at home stage. Again, you've probably read that the dramatic drop in demand has created a gut in supply for oil, and prices of oil dropped below zero for a short period of time before there was some concerted action between nations and oil producers to bring that in. But basically, oil tankers around the world are storing unneeded oil. And that again will have an impact on U.S. jobs, because the U.S. is now one of, I think, the largest single oil producer from shale oil production. And those jobs will probably go away in the short to medium term. This picture just gives you a sense of what's happening state by state, the ratio of initial jobless claims to the state's labor force. And you can see where Wisconsin is sort of in the middle of that effect, where other states are seeing much greater effects. They may be more reliant on manufacturing, where auto plants are closing and things like that, or Nevada, for example, that's heavily dependent on tourism. This again just gives you a sense of where the most sort of cases are occurring as a share of 10,000 per 10,000 in population. Again, the Northeast, the South, Great Lakes is heavily affected, where there's more population density. California, not as much, just because there's speculation. That's because there's less population density in California, and they started some of these actions sooner than other parts of the country. The next few slides I'll go through quickly. If you read the New York Times at all, they have some interesting interactive graphs you can create just to give a picture of what's happening with the pandemic nationally. This is cases and deaths by metro area, and you can see some of the major metropolitan areas in the country. They will be affected economically by all of this, just because of the healthcare response and the shutdown of the economy is necessary to manage all of this. Just by comparison, this is where Milwaukee is, where their cases are doubling every 4 weeks and deaths are doubling every 3 weeks. And then Madison, much lower than what we're seeing in the rest of the country. Again, another look at that is just new cases and new deaths per 1,000 residents. Again, giving you a sense of where some of the hotspots are, like Sioux City, Iowa, where some of the meat plants have been overrun. And then the New York area, as well as Chicago and Washington. This is the comparison for Milwaukee, again, quite a bit lower and relatively stable compared to those larger metropolitan areas. And then Madison really only shows up on the new cases, the number of deaths, while a grim statistic are relatively low and that don't even register on this presentation. So now we turn to Wisconsin. This again shows Wisconsin is heavily affected, as is the rest of the country. This is the spike in initial claims and by comparison what the Great Recession looked like. This again, going back to some national data, we're starting to see in the national data the effect of the shutdown of the economy. This upper left quadrant is drops in manufacturers' new durable good orders. The upper right quadrant is consumer sentiment, which has dropped dramatically. Existing home sales have fallen and are expected to fall even further when the April data comes out, as are new home sales. Another measure of this, travel, has been dramatically affected. The red line is TSA airport checkpoints in March and into early April. And in 2019 is the red line. 2020 is the blue line. Just by comparison, at the Dane County Regional Airport, typically they'll see 2,000 passengers pass through. On a recent day, they saw 60 passengers. So dramatic change there, and that's another area that the county has to manage in terms of revenue impacts, much like the city is going to have to manage impacts on Monona Terrace and other travel-sensitive both revenue sources and activities. This is some information from a hotel consultant that looked at the 24 top markets for lodging. I'll just draw your attention to the numbers on the left hand, those two tables. They have come up with a best and worst case scenario. You'll see in both instances in 2020, revenues will fall. These are room tax revenues, will fall over 50%. Under the worst case scenario, close to 60%. They do anticipate a rebound in 2021, but a return to the base year revenues of 2019 will take at least 4 years. Even with double-digit growth over that time, presuming again we can begin to return to some normal. The graph on the right-hand side again just sort of gives you that sense of what's happening relative to the baseline, and we will see that in Madison with the city room tax collections as well. These are some graphs prepared by a think tank on campus. And this is just looking at what's happening with, again, initial unemployment claims. The variability there is just you apply for initial claims on Sunday of each week, so you see a spike on that day. You know, you saw that initial spike as restaurants and bars closed, and then the safer-at-home orders went into place, and that has closed down those numbers have fallen. That's only because you sort of run out of jobs that can, in effect, be furloughed or terminated. And then there's an expectation that unemployment rate could reach 25%. We're projecting now that it's close to 18%. This is a look at Dane County's initial unemployment claims. These weeks are for 2020. Again, you can see the dramatic effect of just the move to close businesses, safer-at-home orders, and the large drop, and then the fall off in initial claims just as most people are starting to enter the unemployment world as their jobs are, as they lose their jobs. This just gives a sense of how Dane County stacks up as a share of its population compared to Milwaukee, which is the line right above it, and then the state as a whole. So again, I think while it's bad everywhere. It's not necessarily as bad as some parts of the state and Milwaukee. But again, that probably speaks to some of the stability of the state government, the extent of government, and the university in the city. MadRep, in partnership with UW Oshkosh and Economic Development Corporation, did a survey. It didn't have a huge response rate, but 1/3 of Wisconsin businesses will close permanently if Safer at Home lasts more than 3 months. Now, a lot of data still needs to be gathered, but this just gives some sense of what's happening with sales. That's the upper left quadrant. Restaurant sales, which basically have collapsed. Grocers, again, some shifts towards that. And then travel, again, Wisconsin's really matching what's happening in the rest of the country. These graphs just show kind of relative visits to retail, which is the red line, information services, healthcare, and accommodations and food. Again, it's a broad-based effect of the shutdown in the economy. The upper right quadrant is what's happened with hotel visits. Again, no surprise there. And then what's been happening with grocery store visits with that sort of initial onslaught at the beginning of the Safer at Home orders and people just cramming into stores to stock up, kind of a return to normal, and then some fall off recently. This foot traffic just looks at the airports, Green Bay, Madison, and Milwaukee, and the entire U.S. Again, we're following that trend of drops in travel. Closer to home with our own Monona Terrace, the sort of tan lines are 2019, and that's the events for March, April, May, and June in 2019. The darker bar shows the events in those same months in 2020. You'll see there's no events in April, very few in May, and that could change depending on what happens down the line with the Safer at Home order. And then they are hoping there's a return to some normalcy in June, but again, that is hard to predict. But that will play out in challenges in the city budget. That's just one sense of that. Another sense is what's happening with our investment yields, which in the 2020 budget, we're assuming we'll get about $4 million in investment revenues, and that's this top line here of what we predicted back in September. Already that had dropped, and we see what's happened. Those are actuals in January, February, March. The LGIP is the SWIB operated local government investment pool where we do put a lot of our the city's cash, and then the bottom line is the 90-day Treasury bill rate, which is probably where we are heading over time, which again will play out in reduced revenues to the city's general fund as well as other areas. The Congressional Budget Office again updated. I spoke to this back in early April. They have further shown that the damage is going to be greater from the economic or the public health emergency, the economic effect, a 12% decline in gross domestic product. That's an annualized rate of 40%, with they're projecting for all of 2020 about a 6% drop in GDP. Again, that's unprecedented, with a return to some moderate growth in 2021. An unemployment rate in Q2 of 14%. Again, that's for all 3 months of Q2. Some of those months might be much higher, with an annual unemployment rate by the end of 2020 of 11%, and still a high unemployment rate by the end of 2021. And they make some assumptions around social distancing, and they do assume that there'll be later outbreaks of the virus occurring, and that social distancing will stay in place during the second half of this year. And they project that the 10-year Treasury notes will be about 0.6% during Q2 and will stay low throughout 2020. And that harkens back to the investment slide I just showed you. second to last slide, federal and state updates. You probably, again, have all read about the federal stimulus money, which is about $4 trillion now, and more will have to come in future legislation. Almost $500 billion was added for small business loans as that program ran out of money relatively quickly. Funding for some form of a national testing program, modest at best, was also put in, and additional funding for to support healthcare. That fourth bill is expected to be worked on next month, and there's some debate about how this will happen, but hopefully there'll be some sort of budget stabilization funding for state and local governments. I know the National Governors Association has asked, I think, for a $500 billion pot of money to assist with the revenue losses anticipated through all of this. In Wisconsin, that $4 trillion could trickle down to at least $4 billion of impact through the Coronavirus Relief Fund, that's the CRF, and other formula programs. And then we have an unknown impact from $2.3 trillion of that overall $4 trillion in areas such as airports, some workforce development areas, tax relief, aids to individuals, and other programs. Again, you probably also read that the state legislature and governor adopted what's now called Act 185. It had a number of provisions in there to assist with the response to the pandemic. And one element in there that will help Madison residents is the authority to waive interest and penalties on late property tax installment payments. And the county and city are working in concert as required under that state law to put that in place. And then finally, this is just the graph of what's happening with the city COVID response expenditures, which now total a little over $3 million. And much of that is allocation of permanent, permanent staff time, sort of allocating it towards activities such as EOC, incident command work, and other things. And then the non-personnel is really PPE, personal protective equipment, masks, and other types of hand sanitizer and so on, as well as some facility costs. And those have somewhat leveled off recently. So I tried to do that very quickly, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dave. Are there any questions on the presentation? Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate your very sobering overview, Dave. Thank you. I appreciate that you're now providing these to the Finance Committee at each of our meetings. Is my understanding correct, and I think Laura referenced it in the earlier agenda item, that you are planning a major budgetary presentation to our committee at our next meeting on, I think it's May 12th?
Yes, that's correct. We will go through the basically the budget outlook for 2020 and 2021. And that'll incorporate, I think, some of what you saw here in terms of the the economic impacts on tariffs, room tax revenues, increased costs, and things like that.
Thank you. Am I correct that you and your team are the ones that provide Chief Steve Davis with the finance piece of our now weekly Emergency Operations Center written updates to the council?
Yes.
Great. So those I have found helpful the last couple Mondays that we've received them. And I presume that the sort of information that's in that will be elaborated on pretty extensively in our next briefing. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Okay, great. The one question I did want to ask about the last written, in fact, both of the written EOC reports that the council has now received, mentions this convalescence facility for fire and police personnel, and the fact that the contract was terminated. but we paid almost $150,000 for. Could you explain that? Because I have not heard the backstory to that at all.
So in the early days of the response, I think not knowing the extent of what was going to happen with people or first responders testing positive and having symptoms of the COVID-19 disease, both police and fire identified a need for a place where their staff could, in effect, reside if they did not want to reside at home. While they were experiencing the symptoms of the COVID-19 disease. So in response to that, they were working to identify a facility that could be used to house those individuals in the event that we had, a rapid spike in cases. I think thankfully that number of cases has not materialized. But in the interim, we had to hold a facility for that to happen. In order to do that, we had to pay some amount to hold that that facility open so that we could use it if necessary. Within the last week or so, just given what was happening with case counts and the fact that what they thought would happen had not materialized, the fire department and police department agreed that that contract should be terminated. But we still had to, pay some amount associated with holding that site to cover that possibility.
Thank you for the explanation. Is it accurate that expenditure, along with the other non-personnel costs that again you and your colleagues included in the EOC report this week to Alders, would be eligible for FEMA public assistance reimbursement?
That's our hope. I mean, we're still in the stages of trying to connect with FEMA, but we definitely are carrying that as a cost of the emergency response.
Oh, thank you for that. I also wanted to request, if I could, and I know I don't want to take the time tonight to delve into other issues relating to the pandemic's impact on our budget both this year and next year, but for your briefing that you'll have for us in a few weeks' time, it would be helpful to, I think, from my perspective, but I'm sure for all of us, if you could delve pretty significantly into the room tax fund situation, since that is so bleak. And as you can appreciate, I've begun, to receive several inquiries from organizations and even our own, from the case of one city staffer that receives funds from the room tax fund, as to what the implications are for this year. For example, will the general fund temporarily loan the room tax fund money, that sort of thing, so that the obligations will still be met this year? That's one example. Another example of questions that I've received from our own employees are they at risk of being furloughed? The mayor was emphatic in a State Journal article last week that will not be the case, and that we're reassigning or temporarily moving staff to other agencies if there's not the work for them at their own agency. So a further conversation about that, and I would be interesting to see exactly how many employees have been shared with other agencies and what those specific arrangements have been. If you could include that discussion in your next briefing, I think that would be very interesting. And then lastly, something that you've heard me ask about in the other two briefings is a further conversation on what administrative actions we've been taking in terms of hiring and reclasses and that sort of thing. Also would be of interest, please.
Yeah, we will delve into all of those topics at the May 12th meeting.
Thank you very much, Dave. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for Dave on this briefing? All right. I am seeing no further questions. So thank you, Dave, for that. And I will then turn to Alder Moreland for a motion.
I move to adjourn.
Alder Carter.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.